Your mother's name is listed under authorized design changes. I turned the screen toward him. This is the construction contract for the private home my husband and I are building. The land is in both of our names. The mortgage loan is in both of our names. It is not your family's house. It is not a multi-generational home. It is our house. Explain this, I said. He glanced at the screen, not surprised at all. I just added my mom so it would be easier to communicate with the contractor. Why does your mother need the authority to modify a house I am paying half for? He exhaled, his voice dropping. Don't make this so tense. Later on, my mom might come by more often. You'll get used to it. I looked at him for a long time. We never discussed living together. We never agreed to include anyone else in design decisions. Yet in the legal documents for my own home, I was not the only voice. That was when I understood I had never truly been seen as an equal owner of that future. Ethan and I have been married for 5 years, the kind of marriage people look at and call stable. 2 steady jobs, weekend grocery runs, cooking dinner at night, watching the news, talking about the future. We saved carefully, cutting back on trips, eating out less, all for one clear goal: to buy land and build our first home. We even talked about having a baby next year, not casually, but seriously, like 2 adults ready to step into the next chapter. I imagined a bright kitchen, the smell of morning coffee, a backyard big enough for wooden chairs, and an outdoor grill, a place where my child could run without hearing traffic from the street. It was not a luxury dream, just the ordinary dream of a woman in her 30s who wants a real home. Then Margaret, my mother-in-law, found out. She came over one Saturday afternoon carrying a rolled-up tube like she was the one building the house, not me. I remember I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen when I heard the door open and her voice from the living room, casual, as if it had always been her house. She spread the blueprints across the dining table, already revised, red ink notes in the corners. I saw immediately that something was different from the version Ethan and I had approved. Margaret spoke very directly, her tone calm, like she was commenting on the weather. The primary bedroom should be downstairs. I can't climb stairs. I stood still for a few seconds. I thought I had misheard her. We had never talked about living together. There had been no serious conversation about 3 generations under one roof. We had only talked about Ethan and me, about our future child, about our space. I turned to look at my husband. Ethan didn't object. He gave a small, smoothing smile and said, "It's just a suggestion. Just a suggestion." The words sounded light, but they landed like a brick on my chest. I realized I was the only person in that room who thought this wasn't normal. Margaret kept talking about convenience, about how older people shouldn't climb stairs, about how a spacious ground floor would be practical for the whole family. She said, the whole family, so naturally, as if I were the one stepping into a plan that had already been set. That night, I opened the original plan saved on my computer and compared every detail. The primary bedroom had been moved. A large additional room had appeared on the ground floor, with its own bathroom, with windows facing the backyard. I asked Ethan about it, still trying to keep my voice steady. He said his mother was just offering input, nothing serious. But I am not naive. I called the architect to confirm the revisions. That was when I learned the truth. Margaret had called them herself. She requested an additional suite with a private bathroom, clearly noted as intended for an older resident. She said she was representing the family. My hands went cold. No one asked me. No one told me. I was the co-signer on the contract, the one who wired the deposit. Yet I was the last to know about the most significant change to my own house. When I told Ethan what I had found out, he sighed as if I were making something out of nothing. Mom just wants to help. I looked at him and wondered when help had come to mean making decisions in my place. I did not need anyone preparing a bedroom for themselves in a house I had not even moved into yet. What unsettled me most was not the extra room. It was my husband's silence. He never said, "We haven't discussed this." He never said, "This is our house." He just smiled, as if everything would be fine if I chose to stay quiet. I began to understand something very simple. The dream of a house is not about bricks and wood. It is about authority. It is about whether I have a voice in my own life. And in that moment, staring at the revised plan with the added suite for an older resident, I realized I might be building a house I would never truly live in. I thought the blueprint issue was just a misunderstanding, the kind of family misunderstanding everyone eventually laughs off, but it wasn't. A week later, when I went back to the lot to remeasure the backyard, a couple who lived nearby looked at me with a familiar expression. The woman smiled and said, "Oh, you finally made it out. Your mother-in-law stopped by last week." I froze. Margaret had already visited the property on her own, not passing through by accident. She parked, walked the perimeter, spoke to our future neighbors as if she were the actual owner. The neighbor told me casually, unaware she had just placed a small stone into the foundation of my marriage. Margaret had said it with confidence. "We'll be moving here once my son finishes building the house." We. Not they. Not the kids. We. It felt like someone had quietly rewritten the title of my life without asking me. That night, I asked Ethan. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked. I repeated exactly what I had heard. He looked at me and sighed like I was complaining about something minor, like running out of milk. "You're overreacting." Overreacting. The word was so familiar it scared me. I realized every time I was uncomfortable, every time I questioned something, his default response was the same. I was overreacting. I asked him if he knew his mother had gone to see the lot. He said she was just curious. I asked if he knew she told the neighbors she would be moving in. He said maybe they misunderstood. Misunderstood. It was interesting how everything that worked against me could be labeled a misunderstanding. Then Margaret started sending furniture lists, not vague suggestions. Detailed lists, with links, prices, notes. I opened my email one Monday morning, drinking coffee before work, and saw a message from her. The subject line was simple: items to prepare. I clicked on it. The list started with an adjustable bed. Older people need to elevate their heads while sleeping. Next were bathroom grab bars, heavy duty, screwed directly into the wall. Then a non-slip shower chair. I scrolled all the way down. Not one item had anything to do with me. No kitchen like the one I had imagined. No spacious closet. No desk by the window. I could not find my name anywhere in that plan. Everything revolved around Margaret's comfort. I sat there in front of my screen, staring at the list like it was an invoice for a life I had never ordered. That night, I handed my phone to Ethan. I didn't say much. I just asked, "What do you see in this list?" He skimmed it and said, "Mom is just preparing ahead of time. You know how she is. She likes to plan." I asked him if we were building a house for 3 people. He gave a small laugh, the kind meant to soften the air, and said, "Here you go again." I wasn't starting anything. I was just seeing what was happening. Margaret wasn't acting on impulse. She wasn't speaking out of emotion. She visited the lot first. She told the neighbors as if it was already decided. She sent a furniture list designed for herself, not for the small family we were planning. Everything had order, preparation, calculation. What worried me most wasn't her. It was that my husband wasn't surprised. He didn't ask why his mother would say those things. He wasn't confused by a list filled entirely with items for an older resident. He just repeated the same sentence, "You're overreacting." I began to understand that I might not be the only one who didn't know the real plan for this house. And if I wasn't careful, I would become a guest in the very home I was paying for and had spent 5 years of my life building. After I reacted to the blueprint and the furniture list, the air in our apartment went so quiet I could hear the dishwasher running in the kitchen. I didn't yell. I simply said I did not agree with adding a bedroom for his mother without ever discussing it with me. I thought that was a reasonable response from a wife whose name was also on the construction contract. 2 days later, Margaret called me. Her voice was softer than usual, almost gentle. She said she was just excited. She said older people tend to think ahead. She said she had no intention of coming between her son and me. I listened to all of it. I thanked her for calling. I said I understood. I behaved like an adult, not like a new bride being pushed around. After I hung up, I told myself maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it really was just overenthusiasm. Every family has moments like that. Not every mistake is a scheme. That night, Ethan came home looking confident. He said he had spoken clearly to his mother. He said he didn't want me to worry. He said everything was settled. I asked what he told her. He said he told her not to interfere too deeply. He said he reminded her that this was our house. He told the story like a man who had done his duty. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. After 5 years of marriage, you don't want to believe the person beside you is standing on the other side of the door. A few days later, I was sitting on the couch reviewing our mortgage information on Ethan's phone. Not because I was suspicious. We often shared financial documents. When I opened the messages, a thread appeared. I wasn't searching. It was right there. A text from Ethan to his mother. Just stay calm. She'll get used to it. I read it again. Then a third time. There was no long explanation. No argument. No attempt to mediate between two women. Just one sentence. She'll get used to it. I realized I was the she in that sentence. Not his wife, not his partner, not the woman signing loans and contracts with him. Just she. That sentence said more than 100 apologies ever could. Margaret didn't need to push any further. She only needed to wait. According to Ethan, I would adjust. Adjust to plans being changed. Adjust to the primary bedroom being moved downstairs. Adjust to furniture lists that had no place for me. I sat still on the couch, the phone screen glowing in my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt a very clear silence settle between me and the man I had trusted for 5 years. When he walked into the room, I asked him one simple question. Had he really been clear with his mother? He looked at me, then looked away. He said I was doubting him for no reason. He said I should trust him more. I didn't hold up the phone right away. I didn't need to prove I was right. I had seen enough. What hurt wasn't the text itself. It was the ease of it. It wasn't written in anger. It was reassurance. He was reassuring his mother that I would change, that I would adapt, that I was not the one who needed to be protected. I began to understand the most important thing. He didn't see this as a conflict between generations. He saw it as a process of me adjusting to fit into his family. On those evenings when I thought we were building a future together, he may have been imagining a different script, one where his mother had a suite downstairs, and I learned to accept it. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call Margaret to confront her. I didn't send a long message. I simply put the phone down and looked around our rented apartment, the place I once believed was temporary before our dream home. For the first time, I wondered if I was about to step into a house where I would have to get used to not being consulted. And if I had to get used to that now, then maybe the problem was not the blueprint. It was the man telling his mother that I would eventually get used to it. After that apology call, I believed everything would calm down on its own. But it didn't. Margaret started coming to our place every weekend, not stopping by for coffee and leaving. She came like a fixed appointment, steady as a utility bill. 7 minus on Saturday, the doorbell rang. I was still in bed, the light outside just bright enough to tell me morning had arrived. Ethan got up immediately, not surprised at all. He put on a shirt and went to open the door as if he were greeting someone expected. Maybe he was. I was just the only one not informed. Margaret walked in with a large handbag and a box of pastries. She said the house felt too quiet, then turned on the television. Not at a moderate volume for the morning news. Loud enough to make sure I knew I would not be sleeping anymore. The host's voice filled our small, rented apartment. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, wondering why my weekend started with someone else's television. When I stepped into the living room, Margaret was already seated on the couch, remote in hand, like it was her usual spot. She glanced at me, smiled, said good morning, then turned back to the screen. I went into the kitchen to make coffee. When I opened the refrigerator, everything had been rearranged. The vegetables I bought the day before were pushed to the bottom shelf. The almond milk I drink every morning was moved to the back. The meat I had prepared for dinner was taken out of its packaging and placed differently. Margaret walked into the kitchen behind me. She opened the refrigerator again, looked around, then said in a tone full of concern, "These things are not good for my son's health." She took a container of food I had bought and dropped it into the trash. I stood there, still holding my coffee mug. I thought I was the one paying for the food in that refrigerator. I thought I was the one living in this apartment. But on those Saturday mornings, that feeling was no longer clear. Margaret began reorganizing the kitchen. She moved the knives, shifted the spices, rearranged the pots and pans. It took me several minutes to find my own cutting board. Ethan sat at the dining table drinking coffee and scrolling on his phone. He didn't look annoyed. He didn't look surprised. He just let everything happen. One Sunday morning, I tried to sleep a little longer. My work week had been long and exhausting. I thought the weekend was when adults were allowed to sleep an extra hour without asking permission. I heard footsteps outside the bedroom door. Margaret walking back and forth. No knocking. No words. Just enough movement to make it clear I should not stay in bed. When I stepped out, she looked me up and down. A good woman should wake up before her husband. She said it calmly, like she was sharing a timeless moral rule. I looked at Ethan. He was sitting at the table, in front of the breakfast I had prepared the night before. He said nothing. Not because he didn't hear it. The apartment wasn't big enough for anyone to miss it. He just stayed silent. That silence felt heavier than his mother's words. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture about equality or about the fact that I also worked all week. I just stood there wondering when I had to prove I was a good woman by waking up earlier than the grown man sitting in front of me. The following weekend, everything repeated. 7 a.m. The doorbell. The television loud. The refrigerator rearranged. Small comments about how I cooked, how I cleaned. None of it was big enough to explode, but steady enough to wear me down. I began to feel like our rented apartment was a waiting room for a life I had never agreed to. What troubled me most was not that Margaret wanted control. She had been clear from the beginning. It was that Ethan, the man I married, seemed to see no problem with his mother coming every weekend, walking into his wife's kitchen, changing everything, then teaching me how to be a woman. I didn't need a new house to understand this. If I didn't have the right to sleep 1 extra hour in my own rented apartment, then that dream house might not belong to me either. I thought I had gotten used to Margaret coming every weekend, turning the television up loud, rearranging the refrigerator, and teaching me how to be a woman. I thought that was the maximum level of intrusion. I underestimated it. One Sunday morning, while I was standing in the kitchen, Margaret sat at the dining table watching me, like she was judging a cooking show. I set a plate of eggs down in front of Ethan, then placed hers in front of her. She looked at the breakfast for a moment, then said softly, almost more of an exhale than a sentence, she knew how to take better care of a family. I paused for a few seconds. I didn't know who she was talking about. I asked again, trying to keep my voice steady. She took a sip of coffee, then clarified, Ethan's former fiancé. She always woke up earlier. The house was always tidy. It felt like I had just heard a story in which I didn't even know I was a supporting character. I looked at Ethan. He didn't object. He didn't say, Mom, don't say that. He just lowered his head and kept eating, as if the comment were about the weather. I have been married to this man for 5 years. We talked about finances, about children, about where to live, about the future. But he had never told me he had once been engaged. Not a casual relationship. A woman serious enough to be referred to as a former fiancé in his mother's voice. I didn't ask right then. I didn't want to turn the dining table into an interrogation room. But in my mind, everything started rearranging itself. After breakfast, when Margaret went into the living room to watch television, I asked Ethan. He said it was old news. He said it was nothing significant. He said they had been engaged, but it didn't work out. I asked why he had never mentioned it. He shrugged and said he didn't think it was necessary. Not necessary. I sat down across from him and wondered how many parts of his life were not necessary for me to know. Margaret began mentioning that woman more often. Not constantly, but enough for me to hear. When she came over, she always brought dessert. She knew how to talk to the relatives. She never slept in. Those comments were dropped like small needles, not big enough to cause a fight, but steady enough to make me wonder if I was being measured against a standard I didn't even know existed. I began to doubt. Not Margaret. She was very clear in the way she favored the woman from his past. I doubted my position in this marriage. I started asking myself if I had ever been Ethan's first choice, or if I was simply the one who fit better into the current plan. When a mother mentions her son's former fiancé in front of his wife, it is not a slip, it is a message. What chilled me more was that Ethan did not seem uncomfortable. He did not say the past should stay in the past. He did not say that I was the one he chose. He stayed silent. That silence told me more than any explanation ever could. I was not jealous of a woman I had never met. I was jealous of the idea that somewhere in this family's mind there was another version of a wife considered better. And if I had to hear about her every weekend in my own apartment, then maybe I was not just building the wrong house. I might be living in a marriage where I was not the first choice. That argument did not begin with shouting. It began the way most adult arguments do, with a question that sounded harmless. That night, after another weekend of Margaret arriving at 7 in the morning and leaving after dark, I sat down at the dining table. The apartment was quiet again, the television off, but its echo still lingering in my head. I looked at Ethan and asked, very calmly, what if my parents came over every week? I did not say it with a challenge in my voice. I just wanted him to hear the question with his own ears. I wanted him to imagine waking up at 7 every weekend because my father wanted to watch the news at full volume in the living room. Ethan did not need long to imagine it. He became angry almost immediately. This house is not a hotel. The words landed on the table like something heavy. I looked at him. I didn't bring up the fact that his mother had been coming every weekend for months. I didn't need to. We both knew the truth. I just asked again, slowly, what about your mother? He exhaled sharply, stood up, then sat back down. I could see him trying to control himself, but his voice had already changed. Then he said something I don't think he meant to say. Mom will live with us after the house is finished. You know that. There was no dramatic music, no raised voices, just a sentence spoken in impatience. I went still. You know that. I sat there trying to replay every conversation we had ever had. I clearly remember him telling me we would not live with his mother. I remember him looking at me and saying he understood I needed my own space. I remember him reassuring me when Margaret mentioned the downstairs bedroom. And now he spoke as if it had all been decided long ago. I asked him quietly to repeat himself. He looked at me and said it again, calmer this time. Mom will live with us after the house is finished. No more hiding behind the word suggestion. No more apologies. No more you're overreacting. Just the truth. It felt like I had just uncovered a fine print clause in a contract that had been covered up before. He had promised the opposite. He had said we would live separately. He had said he respected how I felt. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the table. I just sat there and understood something very clearly. I was not the last person to know this plan. I was simply the last to be informed. Ethan added that I knew that. As if I had agreed during some meeting I didn't remember attending. I wondered when my silence had become consent. In my mind, I saw the new house, the downstairs bedroom, the grab bars in the bathroom, the furniture list meant for one person. All the pieces suddenly fit together. There was no misunderstanding, no excessive excitement, no overthinking, just a plan, and I had never been part of making it. I looked at the man sitting across from me, the man I had been married to for 5 years, the man I thought was my partner. I asked him one last question. Did he remember what he had promised me? He stayed quiet for a few seconds, then said, "Things change. Things change. Maybe they do. Things always change. But promises should not change based on what is convenient for one person." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I understood more clearly than ever that the house we were building would not have only 2 people in it. And what chilled me most was that Ethan did not see it as betrayal. He saw it as obvious. You know that. No, I didn't. And if that was the truth he believed was obvious, then maybe I had misunderstood my role in this marriage for a very long time. After that argument, I no longer believed in reassurance. When someone tells you that you know that, while you clearly do not, the issue is no longer a misunderstanding. The issue is that information was intentionally withheld. I did not make a scene. I did not call my mother-in-law. I did not continue arguing with Ethan. I did what any adult should do when questioning a major financial decision. I reopened every document related to the house deposit. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, each file saved by date. The deposit contract, the agreement with the contractor, the list of primary contacts. I read every line carefully. We had signed the deposit contract a few weeks earlier. I remember that day clearly. I remember the rush of transferring the first large payment toward a dream. I remember Ethan saying this was the most important step of our lives, but I had failed to check one small detail. It was not in the signature section. It was in the contact authorization section the contractor would follow for any technical changes. On the list of individuals authorized to communicate directly with the contractor, Margaret's name was there, not at the bottom of the page, not listed as a reference, but as one of the individuals permitted to discuss modifications, update designs, adjust materials. I stared at her name for several minutes. I thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. I zoomed in. I scrolled down, then back up. Her name was still there, Margaret. I had not signed any additional addendum. I had not agreed to add a third party to the contract for our home. I replayed every change that had happened. The downstairs bedroom, the private bathroom, the details I was informed about only after they had already been requested. I no longer had to wonder how the contractor accepted the revisions. They had not done anything wrong. They simply followed the person listed as authorized. I sat there quietly. No background music, no dramatic scene, just a bright screen in a dark room. I called Ethan over. I did not yell. I did not accuse. I simply turned the laptop toward him. He looked down. It took a few seconds for him to understand what I was pointing at. I asked him why his mother's name was there. He said it was just for convenience. He said his mother had experience. He said he did not think it was a big deal. Not a big deal. I asked him why he had not told me. He said he planned to. He said he thought I would react strongly, so he had not mentioned it yet. That answer was worse than silence. He had not forgotten. It was not accidental. He had deliberately added his mother's name to the authorization list without telling me. I realized something very clearly. This was no longer a family conflict between me and my mother-in-law. This was a legal decision. Authority to intervene in a shared asset. The question of who had the right to alter the structure of a house I was paying for. I was not a jealous daughter-in-law. I was a co-owner on the contract. And in that contract, I had been excluded from a critical decision. I asked him one final question. Did he intend to tell me before adding her name? He stayed silent. That silence answered everything. I closed the laptop. I did not say anything else. I did not need to argue. Everything was written in black and white. For the first time, I did not feel like I was overreacting. I was reading the truth. And the truth was that my husband had given decision-making authority over our future home to his mother without my consent. It was no longer about a downstairs bedroom. It was calculated betrayal. The night I saw Margaret's name on the authorized contact list, I understood I was no longer in a family disagreement. I was in a marriage where I was not treated as an equal partner. And once I saw that in writing, I could not pretend I had not seen it. I did not make a scene. I did not throw anything. I did not wait for another conversation. The next morning, when Ethan left for work, I started packing. Not everything. I only took what was truly mine. Clothes, a few books, personal documents, my laptop, a few old photos from before he was in them. I folded each shirt calmly. I packed everything into the suitcase I used for weekend trips. Back when I believed my future was clear and simple, there were no tears. Not because I was not sad, but because I had already finished being sad. On the mornings with the television at 7, on the nights I heard, "You know that." I locked the door to our rented apartment, left the key on the kitchen counter, and drove to my parents' house. I had driven that road hundreds of times. But this time I was not a daughter stopping by for the weekend. My father, Richard Hayes, opened the door. He looked at me, then at the suitcase behind me. He did not ask what had happened right away. He simply helped me bring the suitcase inside. My mother made coffee. Everything unfolded so normally that I almost laughed. Maybe that is what adults do when they do not want to make things more dramatic. After I told them, not every detail, only the important parts, my father sat quietly for a while. He did not speak badly about Ethan. He did not blame anyone. He did not tell me to go back or to try harder. He asked one question. Did you feel respected in that house? Not do you love him? Not are you sure? Not what will people say? Just did you feel respected? I opened my mouth to answer, but no word felt right. I thought about the downstairs bedroom, the furniture list, the text that said she will get used to it, Margaret's name on the contract. I did not answer. I stayed silent, and that silence was clear enough. I slept in my old room that night. The room was the same, only I was different. There was no wind in the morning, no footsteps outside my door. I woke up at 9 and realized I had slept straight through. 3 weeks later, the divorce was filed, not because of an affair, not because of violence, not because money had disappeared, simply because I realized I was signing on to a life where I had no voice. The process moved quickly. No fight over major assets, no courtroom drama. We had been renting. The new house was not built yet. The deposit was handled according to the terms. Everything was orderly, like a financial file being reorganized. Ethan said I was overreacting. He said we could talk more. He said his mother would understand. But I did not leave because of Margaret. I left because my husband added his mother to our contract without telling me. I did not leave in tears. I left in clarity. 3 weeks may sound short, but when you have seen the truth in signatures and names printed on paper, you do not need 3 years to think. I was not angry. I simply no longer wanted to convince anyone that I deserved respect in my own home. And when my father asked that question, I understood. If I had to stay silent to keep a marriage, then that was not a place I should remain. After the divorce papers were filed, my life did not collapse like it does in the movies. I still went to work every morning. I still attended meetings, signed documents, handled the familiar numbers. Everything moved forward, so normally it almost felt cold. Ethan continued going to work as well. He worked at my father's company, Richards, and for years he believed it was more than a job. He believed it was a direct path to the highest position. He often spoke about the future with an easy confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from thinking you are in the right place within the right family. He never said it outright, but everyone understood he believed he would eventually take over because he was the son-in-law. After the divorce, under the company's rotation policy, he was reassigned to a different position. The policy was not new. Every few years, management-level employees were required to change divisions to gain experience. No one was demoted. No one lost pay. It was simply a transfer. But Ethan did not see it that way. He saw it as punishment. He believed the divorce had cost him his future role. He did not see policy. He saw a wounded ego. One afternoon, while I was at my parents' house, I heard the doorbell ring. My father went to answer it. Ethan was standing there. He no longer had his usual confidence. He stepped inside, then did something I never thought I would see. He knelt in front of my father. I stood in the hallway, watching the scene as if I were observing a film I did not want to be in. He said he wanted to keep his position. He said he had dedicated years to the company. He said personal matters should not affect his career. My father did not raise his voice. He did not revisit what had happened between Ethan and me. He simply said one sentence, very calmly. Work and marriage are two different things. But being a son-in-law and being an employee are also two different things. The sentence was not loud. There was no threat. It was simply a basic truth. Ethan was no longer a son-in-law. He was an employee like everyone else. And employees follow the rotation policy like everyone else. He stood up. I could see he did not accept it. Not because he was treated unfairly, but because he was no longer treated as special. A few days later, he resigned. No one forced him. There was no termination decision. He submitted his resignation because he refused the new position. But the market does not wait for anyone, and rent does not show sympathy. I heard about it through someone I knew at the company. I did not call him. I did not text him. I simply noted his choice. Margaret moved in with him into a small rented apartment. Not the 2-story house with the primary bedroom downstairs. No backyard. No private bathroom designed to her preference. Just an apartment just large enough where everything had to be shared. I did not feel pleased. I did not feel victorious. I simply saw everything unfolding according to the logic of the decisions that had been made. Ethan believed he lost everything because of the divorce, but the truth is he traded it away. He placed his future in the role of son-in-law instead of in his ability as an employee. When that role disappeared, he no longer knew who he was within that system. There was no revenge, no scheme, just company policy and pride. I thought about the sentence he once told me, "You know that." Maybe this time, he was the one who did not know. A few months after the divorce, I no longer followed Ethan's life. I did not ask mutual friends. I did not search his name on social media. I was busy working, busy restructuring my life, busy learning how to be alone without feeling empty. Then one day, I saw him. Not in a scheduled meeting, not in a conference room, not in a company parking lot. I saw him standing in a long line outside a food assistance center. I had driven past that place many times, knowing it distributed meals to people in need. I never thought I would see a familiar face there. Ethan stood in line, his hands in the pockets of an old coat. He looked thinner. The tailored suits were gone, along with the confidence of a man who believed he was about to inherit an entire company. I parked across the street, not to follow him, just because I could not immediately drive away. When it was his turn, he received 2 meal portions. 2 portions. I looked behind him. Margaret was standing there. She held her handbag tightly, her eyes no longer sharp like they were on those Saturday mornings in my rented apartment. They did not see me. I did not call out to them. I simply sat in my car and watched a simple truth unfold. The man who once declared he was the head of the house. The man who said this house is not a hotel. The man who said, you know that. Now, standing in line for food assistance, there was no mockery in me, no sense of victory, only quiet. Life did not require me to take revenge on anyone. Decisions create their own consequences. I drove back to my own apartment, not the 2-story house with the downstairs bedroom, just an apartment that was enough, tidy, clean, everything exactly where I placed it. The next morning I woke up at 8:30. No television at 7. No footsteps passing back and forth outside my bedroom door. No one opening the refrigerator and judging what I bought. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the light fall across the floor. I did not have the dream house I once sketched in my mind. No backyard. No room for children. But I had something I had not had for a long time. Peace. Peace does not come from square footage. It comes from not having to ask permission to sleep an extra hour. Not having to explain why I choose the milk I prefer. Not having to prove that I deserve to be heard. I thought back through the entire journey. From the revised blueprint, from the furniture list, from the text that said she will get used to it, from Margaret's name on the contract. Everything led to the same conclusion. Ethan wanted to build a house that fit his mother's plan. I only wanted to live a life where my voice mattered. As I sat there with a cup of coffee in my hand and silence around me, I understood I had not lost everything. I had lost the dream of a house. But I kept myself. He wanted a house for his mother. I wanted a life where I did not need permission to exist. This story is not about a bedroom or a blueprint. It is about your position within your own marriage. When major decisions are made and you are only informed afterward, it is no longer about convenience. It is about boundaries. And a relationship only lasts when 2 people are truly equal in the most important decisions. If you have ever felt pushed aside in your own home, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Would you choose to stay silent and get used to it, or step away before it is too late? Do not forget to follow the channel so you do not miss the next stories. Thank you for listening to the entire story.